Today's episode of the Back in Shape podcast is going to help you when you are traveling if you have lower back pain, sciatica, or any sort of back injury. Give you a little bit of confidence so you can move forwards knowing that you have some tools and resources to lean on. As with all episodes of the podcast, on our website is a full detailed article which goes into much more detail on certain aspects that we cover in the podcast, as well as additional points as well for that extra guidance and those extra specific nuances of travel. So we thought it started off with the acknowledgement that travel when you're recovering from back pain, or if you have recovered, but this is your first long trip, it creates a bit of anxiety. Am I going to be able to do it? Is it going to be okay? Is my back going to go and ruin the whole thing? I've had this plan for a long time. Maybe before I injured my back, I'd planned this holiday and I'm really looking forward to it. And we want to give you guys some tools to make sure that you feel more confident and you can assuage some of that anxiety that's building up because you know what you can do. When you've got a plan, it often gives us a little bit more comfort when we're moving forwards with these things. But in spite of having a plan, you want to acknowledge first and foremost that the travel in of itself is going to be a challenge. It's going to be activities that are out of the ordinary. Many of you will be watching this. If you'd seen one of our previous podcasts recently, we talk about stats from the British Heart Foundation that many of the adults of working age on average spend 9.5 hours a day sitting. A day of travel is very different. It's different kinds of sitting in different chairs, maybe chairs that aren't set up for you, maybe it's a plane, etc. So we want to acknowledge that the activity in of itself is a very peculiar one. And this is fundamentally why we talk about the importance of resistance-based training, because you are going to put your body under certain strains and stresses. Even if we look at the fit, healthy athlete that is used to doing one sport and then moves over to another sport, the way in which they use their bodies differently in that other sport means that often they find that really difficult in the first couple of times, maybe the first couple of training sessions or game scenarios. They're like, man, I thought I was fit, but this is really knocking my body around a little bit and I'm not used to it. So if that can happen to high-level athletes, it's going to happen to all of us. A days of travel is peculiar. So it's going to strain our body in different ways. And so if we're doing good, progressive, resistance-based work, then that need to carry that bulky suitcase that's 20, 25 kilos is not going to be as impactful as if you're one of those that unfortunately has the opinion that, oh, do you know what, I don't need to lift more than a 5-pound weight because I don't need to do weightlifting. Well, that's a belief that will unfortunately lead to significant vulnerability, because at the end of the day, many of us, when we travel, we're traveling with suitcases. And if we're traveling anywhere for any length of time, a week, 2 weeks, it's probably going to be around that 20 kilos mark. And if that's the heaviest thing that you've lifted all week or year or in all decade, that's a real problem. And it can provoke injuries that can happen. So this episode has the assumption that you are, of course, doing some resistance work to make your body have a greater capacity to do things that it's not ordinarily exposed to. So those things are less likely to push you over the edge and relapse your back, or just cause a new fresh injury because you couldn't hold things together. Maybe you injured your knee because you were trying to carry the suitcase that you couldn't quite manage and you slipped or slid because you weren't competent enough. So enough on that. Let's move on to the first part here, which is these 5 little tips that are going to help you, because fundamentally the transit when we're going away is the biggest hurdle, both there and on the way back. And the first tip we've got for you guys is just take a small towel. And this can be maybe the size of a hand towel, not a kitchen towel, but a hand towel, something that you can roll up nicely. And it serves as 2 purposes. Number 1, you're going to be sat in peculiar seats. Maybe it's in the car seat, maybe it's in another seat, maybe it's on the plane. Having this little towel that you can roll up and place in the small of your lower back to support the natural lumbar curve is vital. Yes, many cars, especially some of the higher end cars, will have built-in lumbar supports. You can always buy off Amazon a number of different lumbar supports, but often those supports put the lumbar curve in the wrong place, number 1. Number 2, they're not focused enough to actually hit the right spot anyway. And number 3, because they don't move, you can quite easily find you just slide down the chair and they end up reinforcing a worse position rather than supporting the lower back in the way we want. And when we're sitting, we have to remember the strain on the back, or the direction of strain when we're sitting for these long periods, is to flatten the lordosis and for the bum to slide forwards on the seat. That is the natural movement pattern that our body is resisting. So having that small rolled up towel placed to support that lower back during these longer trips is going to be really helpful. Secondarily, you will feel when the towel falls down the back, you feel, oh, my bum's moved away, it's been sliding away from the seat, the towel's fallen back, and you can readjust it rather than getting caught out. Next thing you know, you've been slouched in the car, maybe or on the plane seat for hours on end, and now you got to get up and your back's feeling a little bit vulnerable. So the towel is a great little option. Secondarily, you can do the towel exercise, and we've got plenty of videos on the website, and I think we even linked to this in the article. The actual towel exercise, lying on the floor, to just offer an opportunity to decompress that lumbar spine, put that spine back into a neutral position, redistribute the load in a more appropriate manner through that lumbar spine, and just give it, all in all, a little bit of respite. Because at the end of the day, it's the cumulative load that will often get you on the travel. It's the cumulative just sitting on that lower back that's injured that will often be what flares things up. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, we recommend icing to our members, and there's specific guidance on that. Because it just helps. It helps calm down excess inflammation, and recognize if you're going to be sitting, whether it's a train, car, or a plane, you're going to be sitting for long periods. Your back's going to be pressed up against the seat. It's going to start getting sweaty. You may as well be heating the lower back. And we know that we don't recommend heating for the lower back. So using something like BioFreeze that you can get in the spray, and I would say the spray is the best, to be completely honest. Other people like the gels, the roll-ons, etc., but I've just always gone on with the sprays. They work quite nicely, and you can just spray a little bit on that lower back, and it's just going to offer a remedy. It's like you're able to do icing on the go, but you don't have to carry a freezer around with you. Granted, if you're on some of the planes, you can perhaps ask for some ice, but it's so easy to just decant some BioFreeze from the main bottle into a smaller bottle of spray, maybe even like a mouth spray bottle, and then you can just spray it on your lower back as and when needed. And that can offer a lot of aid. And I know members that we've got in the program that have traveled with that strategy. It really, really helps them. And it's just easy to just do every so often and then forget about it. So definitely worthwhile doing. And I would say this is just from patient experience. BioFreeze tends to be the best one. There are some other brands like Deep Freeze, etc. But just from feedback from members, they say, yeah, it's not quite the same as BioFreeze. They've been around for ages. It's not particularly expensive. You can pick it up in your local Boots. And no, we don't work or get endorsed by BioFreeze, but it's a good product and it can help you. So next one is taking breaks. Now, if you're on a car journey, this is a lot easier to do because you can manufacture them and you've probably planned out the route, etc. And you can make sure you're taking breaks, getting up, moving around. If you're on the plane or on a train, you can do similar in so much as you can get up and move around the aisles, and that is enough to break that cycle. We talk about in the article the more extreme example of bed sores developing in someone who's bedbound for days on end. It's the pressure on that same spot that creates the sore itself. Well, with our lower back, if we've got that injury there, that disc injury, it's not necessarily fully competent tissue yet, let's just say. So that consistent pressure, if we can just get up and move around, we alleviate that constant drive. So the area can catch a break, almost like being underwater, coming up for air and then going back down again. It's that kind of concept. So getting up, moving around, yes, it has many benefits to getting your legs moving and loosening up some of the muscles, which we'll talk about in a moment, but it also just takes pressure off the same spot that's being loaded on for a long period. And it's so tempting. We talk about this in the article that seat selection can make a big difference, especially if you're on a plane. Choosing an aisle seat allows you to take those breaks more readily. There's less barriers. Plus, the people that are sat next to you by the window will probably wake up at some point during the flight and want to get out to go to the bathroom, forcing you, even if maybe you're in the middle of that film you wanted to watch, to get up and move around. Whereas if you're inside on the window seat and you want to get up and move around, there's that extra barrier. Oh, the guy next to me is asleep. I don't want to wake him, so I'll stay sat down. So seat selection can also help you manufacturing breaks, especially if you are on a longer haul plane journey. So definitely something worth considering if you're planning that trip a little bit further out and you haven't selected your seats yet. Do that early so you make sure you get a good seat. The next one, number 4, is going to be stretching the lower body. Recognizing that most of the transit time when we're going on these holidays is spent sitting. And the two areas that are going to stiffen up are going to be your hip flexors, because your hips are sat at 90 degrees for most of the time, and then also your hamstrings because your knees are at 90 degrees most of the time. So when you're getting up on those breaks, doing a little bit of stretching on those two key areas can just help free up and liberate your hips a little bit more. Because as the hips stiffen up, they start to pull that lower back. And as we mentioned earlier, that pulling of the lower back into flexion, into flattening of the lordosis, is going to be kind of supported by those hamstrings pulling from underneath as well. So if we can just stretch those areas out, you'll find it's a little bit easier for you to go back to the sitting position, pop that towel in, and you're just a little bit more comfortable. The use of reclining chairs, where that's appropriate, can also help here. Yes, it's not ideal for your neck, but it'll help take a little bit of pressure off your lower back. So getting out and stretching, even if and certainly if you're traveling on a road trip, even 30 seconds per leg twice through, it takes a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes max. You can do it while you're waiting for maybe a coffee or while the other members in your party are going to the bathroom. And it's just going to free up your hips and get you feeling a little bit better. Alongside a little walk around the block or around the car park or in through the service station, it just really helps. And as we mentioned earlier, adding in that towel where appropriate and where practically acceptable, lying over the towel in those little breaks can also be a good option as well. Last one pertains not to anything you will do on the trip, but it pertains to leaving early. And this is so important. Last thing you want, especially if you're going abroad, is to be turning up late. You're now in a bunch of queues because everyone else is rushing through. So then you're waiting in line for 2 hours just to check your baggage in. Then you're having to shoot over to security. And it's all just very stressful. Stress is not going to help you anyway from that point of view, but just the franticness of the whole trip. If we leave early, we can avoid that. Often we get there early so we can check in a lot faster. We can get through to the relative comfort of the departure lounge and everything's just a little bit more relaxed. Yes, you're going to be waiting around for longer, but you've got the flexibility when you're waiting around, not having to be in a queue, of being able to go for a walk, be able to lie down, be able to sit in a chair, be able to get up out of the chair, be able to do all those different things once you're the other side. So I would really encourage you to factor in travel, factor in time delays, and just get there early, especially if you are departing and going on international travel. It just makes such a massive difference. So with those 5 tips out of the way, I wanted to just briefly cover the trip types we've got. And this is a very simple one, and there's not really much need for explanation, especially if you've watched some of our other videos. Fundamentally, when you're going away, choose a hotel that has good bed and pillows. Obviously, we all have a budget. We can't spend limitless amounts of money when we're going away. There's going to be some price constraints, but try and choose somewhere that does have a good bed, and secondarily, somewhere that maybe can offer you extra pillows if needed. Many of you will find sleeping on your side, for example, with a pillow between the knees, and using pillows for support, as we've discussed in other podcasts, can be a really helpful way for you to get a better night's sleep. So having a hotel that maybe even you're calling ahead to request that can really make a big difference to your night's sleep. Now, many of you watching this, you'll be planning like a nice relaxing holiday. Maybe it's, time off from work and you're going to go and chill out. And that's easy to do what I've just said. Some of you watching this will be going to, staying in hostels, going backpacking, camping, etc. And those are different trips. So if you're doing those sorts of things, you already know that it's maybe a little bit more strain on the body and you're prepared for that. So because you're prepared for that, you've got things like the towel packed in, factored in. You've got some biofreeze on hand because it's likely you're going to be doing things that even if you didn't have a bad back, carry with them the prospects of injury. If you're going hiking on a hiking trip, there's a chance you could fall over and sprain yourself. So you've probably taken some element of first aid with you to support you in the case that could happen. And you're a bit more aware of those things and maybe a little bit more cautious in an appropriate way. So with those sorts of things, if we're going to be sleeping on the floor, etc., you already know that before you've traveled. So this isn't particularly relevant. Make the plans as is appropriate. And maybe if you're in a particularly bad way with your back, consider the need or the necessity of that trip. Is there any way it can be perhaps postponed a little bit until you've got better conditioning in your body and are able to deal with that quite peculiar activity? Going back to what we mentioned earlier, some of those sorts of trips, they are really very different to the way in which we use our body on a daily basis. If you've done all the right work strengthening wise, and we know many of our members have been on those sorts of trips, you're going to have a great time, you're going to have fun, you're going to do all that hiking, etc., and it's going to be a-okay, because you've also got a little bit of extra flexibility because you're out there and you've got no constraints or restrictions from modern life. You can lie on the towel whenever the hell you want. You can get some of that biofreeze on your lower back. You can take it as easy as you want, even though you may be hiking quite long distances and doing other, out of the ordinary activities. So hopefully that helps. And again, with these podcasts, any questions that you guys have on any particular areas, nuance, post those in the comments if you're watching on one of the platforms that has comments enabled, YouTube, for example, or if you're on the website, there's that comment section down in the bottom for anything that's not quite clear. And the final point, I think, before we start wrapping this up, was just talking about short stays versus long stays. Those of you that are consistent, you're diligent with your exercises. Sometimes there's that feeling. I remember speaking to a member once. It was around about Christmas time, and he felt terrible guilt for not doing his exercises on Christmas Day. And he made progress, and it was great. But don't feel guilty. If you're going on one of those city breaks, maybe it's a long weekend, maybe it's to the countryside, and you're going to be doing a lot of walking, etc., just get what I would consider your phase 1 in. Get a little bit of towel, a little bit of lower body stretching, a little bit of icing perhaps, because you know that maybe you're one of those people that do the 9.5 hours every day sitting. Now you're walking 10K plus every day, running around maybe Paris or Rome, trying to see all the sights, whatever the case may be. You're doing lots of exercise in one way, but it's only going to be for a short period, a couple of days. So don't worry about trying to get your exercises or your main workouts in as well. Just do some of that care of self, back care routines, and enjoy your time away. Know that when you get back, you can get straight back into your workouts. And if you're on the other side of things and you're planning your family vacation, or you're going away for a week, 2 weeks to just relax at some sort of holiday resort, then often they have the gym. Or a gym included. And I would encourage you to make some time, maybe once a day or every other day, to get a good workout done. Sure, you don't have to go as hard as you might do at home, but actually you'll probably find that doing that workout in the hotel gym will make you feel better. You'll just kind of feel a little bit more energized, maybe doing it earlier on in the day compared to when you'd usually do it. And then you can just enjoy the sunshine, enjoy whatever you're doing. That can work really, really well. But I would suggest if you are away for a longer period, do make the time. It's often only 30 to 45 minutes of working out. It's a very small amount, and it will just keep you in the groove of things, and you'll probably feel you have more energy than when you don't do it afterwards. But like many things, when you're sat there, you wake up in the morning, you go, I'm on holiday, I can't be bothered to go to the gym, I can't be bothered to go down there, even though it's only 3 floors down in the lift and you've just got to walk 10 steps to get to the lift. Do it. You will thank yourself afterwards. You'll finish in the gym, you'll have a shower, you've come out feeling fresh, the sun's on your face, you'll just feel fantastic, and you'll feel proud that you've done the exercise, you've done a little bit of work on that point of view, and now you can enjoy the rest of your day. So definitely something to consider. And that brings us into the return trip and, how do we get back into things afterwards? For the return trip, it's all the same stuff as what we've already discussed. There's 5 tips. Follow those. Think about what you're doing. Think about the fact that it's, we want to plan ahead, get there early to the airport, etc., to make sure that the journey is as smooth as possible. But when it comes to getting back into life once you're the other side of the trip, it's always tempting to maybe push yourself really hard on that first week, but don't. When we get back into our working routine, our daily life, so to speak, that first week back off holiday, going back into your usual workouts, go at 75%, go through the motions. Maybe you don't use quite as much resistance as you usually do, maybe certain weights, certain bands, etc. And then over that week, you can start ramping things up, and then you're back into the swing of things and you can start pushing yourself again. Hopefully that's given you kind of, in today's podcast, a nice breakdown of how you should go about this holiday, some things to think about, some actionable tips you can take away with you. And know that if you're one of our members in the group, you can always reach out to us, as many members do. I always say before you go away, because then you can get the tips beforehand. Let us know. If you're going on a skiing trip or if you're going on just a family holiday to go and chill out somewhere in the sun, let us know in the group and we can just give you a few pointers, a few tips specific to your circumstances to help make sure that you feel okay. And I think that's one of the perks of the membership itself. You members know that there is that support there. So if you do get into a little bit of trouble, in preparation or while you are away, you can always reach out to us. It's literally the other side of the computer or the other side of your smartphone. There's some support to just make sure we can get you out of that troublesome spot if you are unlucky while you're on holiday. Maybe you slip. Maybe it does prove a little bit too much. Maybe the kid's running around the airport whilst you're trying to carry 2 suitcases of 20 kilos and, whatever else, having that support there, just someone to lean on if you do find you're a little bit overwhelmed is really, really helpful. So hopefully that's been a helpful episode of this Back in Shape podcast. If you do have any questions, know there's that comment section there. We read and reply to all of your comments and they help us guide future episodes as well, especially if you did find this sort of episode of kind of like a daily task, so to speak, helpful. Let us know in the comments. As always, if you know someone else that would benefit from the podcast, find it useful, find it valuable, consider sharing it with them. And as always, see you in the next episode of the Back in Shape podcast. Thanks for watching.